Every time I come out here, Vinny's doing a job and you're holding his hand.
Me and him split everything. We started yesterday.
Get your hands dirty for a change.
Most kids growing up in the 1980s spent their free time playing video games, riding bikes, or hanging out with friends. But for Paul Teutul Jr., life looked very different. At just 12 years old, he was already spending long days in the heat and noise of Orange County Ironworks, the family business owned by his father, Paul Teutul Jr. While other children were outside playing, Paul Jr. was sweeping metal shavings off the shop floor, carrying tools to grown men and learning what it meant to work hard from an early age. He often visited his father's job sites before he was even old enough to work legally, and instead of toys, he collected scraps of metal to turn into small sculptures. To him, pieces of steel were building blocks of imagination. This early exposure shaped everything he would later become. By the time he was 14, Paul Jr. was already welding with skill and precision that even older workers respected. He wasn't just learning techniques, he was learning how to think like a craftsman. Still, life under his father's watchful eye was far from easy. Paul Jr. was known for being tough, demanding, and often harsh with his son. Mistakes were not overlooked. They were loudly criticized in front of everyone. Many thought the treatment was unfair, but Sr. believed it was necessary to make his son stronger. This father-son dynamic, filled with both respect and conflict, laid the foundation for the complicated relationship that would later explode into one of reality TV's most famous family feuds. By the time Paul Jr. was in high school, he was already following a different path than most of his classmates. Instead of spending all day in classrooms, he joined a vocational program that allowed him to split his time between traditional school and hands-on metalwork. He studied welding blueprints and the finer points of working with steel. One instructor even said Paul Jr. had a gift, an ability to understand how metal wanted to move before he even touched it. That natural sense for design and structure gave him a unique edge. After graduation, when he returned to his father's shop, he wasn't the kid sweeping floors anymore. He was a respected fabricator who could keep up with seasoned professionals. At just 19 years old, he was placed in charge of the railing division of Orange County Ironworks, which made up almost half of the company's income. It wasn't favoritism. He had earned it through skill and vision. His designs brought a fresh, modern touch to the company, and customers often requested him personally. Workers who were older and skeptical at first soon admitted that Paul Jr. knew exactly what he was doing. Even so, Paul Jr. began to feel restless. Making railings and staircases was stable work, but it didn't excite him. Deep down, he wanted to create something more alive, something that reflected his artistic side. In his spare time, he began sketching motorcycles, not realizing those drawings would change his life forever. It started small, almost by accident. Paul Jr. had a renewed interest in motorcycles, and he asked his son to help build one. When he saw Paul Jr.'s designs, he was stunned. They weren't just technically impressive, they were art. From that moment, father and son decided to turn motorcycles into more than a hobby. With around $175 scraped together from the ironworks business, they launched Orange County Choppers. At first, the setup wasn't glamorous. They worked out of a cold basement with basic tools. Sr. kept 80% of the company, while Jr. held 20%, but ownership percentages didn't matter in those early days. What mattered was the dream. Their first bike, True Blue, took 4 long months to complete. Painted in blue with white flames, it looked like something that belonged in a big, time builder's showroom rather than a small family garage. When they brought it to Daytona in 1999, people were shocked. Suddenly, Orange County Choppers was on the map. But success wasn't instant or easy. Money was tight, tools broke, and suppliers demanded cash up front. Paul Jr. often worked 18-hour days, sometimes sleeping on a couch in the shop to meet deadlines. The father and son fought constantly, not for the cameras but for survival. Yet through all the arguments, one thing was clear. They couldn't stop building. This relentless drive would eventually push them into the spotlight in a way neither of them could have imagined. In 2002, Everything changed with a phone call from a television producer who had seen their bikes in a magazine. At first, Paul Teutul wasn't interested. The producer pitched the idea of a show about fixing up junkyard bikes, but Sr. dismissed it. "We build them from scratch," he insisted. Weeks later, the producer came back with a new idea, film the real process, fights and all. Paul Jr. wasn't thrilled. He worried the cameras would ruin their work, and even wrote his dad a 5-page letter saying the show would make them look foolish. Still, the family needed the money, so they agreed. On March 31, 2003, American Chopper premiered. Within 3 episodes, it became a phenomenon, with millions tuning in each week. Suddenly, the Teutul's weren't just bike builders, they were celebrities. Their small shop turned into a tourist attraction, and merchandise flew off the shelves. Discovery Channel raked in millions in sales. At first, audiences were drawn to Paul Teutel's temper and explosive personality, but it was Paul Jr.'s designs that kept them watching. Fans were captivated by his quiet focus and artistic approach. One famous scene of him building a gas tank in silence, without music or commentary, became one of the most requested clips ever. Enrollment in welding schools across America skyrocketed. They called it the Poly Effect. Orange County Choppers had become more than a shop. It was a brand known worldwide. Of all the bikes Paul Jr. built, none carried more emotional weight than the Fire Bike, unveiled in 2003. It wasn't just another custom motorcycle. It was a tribute to the 343 firefighters who died during the September 11th attacks. Every detail of the bike carried meaning. One of the most powerful features was a real piece of steel from the wreckage of the World Trade Center, welded directly by Paul Jr. himself. The frame was redesigned to support hundreds of hand-painted emblems, one for each fallen firefighter. The bike became a symbol of remembrance, and when it was later involved in an accident, the New York Fire Department treated it with the same care they would a fallen comrade. To this day, it remains one of the most meaningful creations ever built at Orange County Choppers. Years later, Paul Jr. revisited that pain and pride by building another 9011 tribute bike, this time unveiling it at a major event attended by city officials and survivors' families. The reaction was overwhelming. People cried as they saw the bike, understanding it was more than a machine. It was a message of healing and honor. These projects proved Paul Jr. wasn't just a builder of motorcycles, he was a storyteller through steel, using his craft to honor moments far bigger than himself. But behind the fame, money and success, tension inside the shop grew worse. What had started as creative disagreements turned into shouting matches that sometimes overshadowed the work itself. Paul Teutul, old, school and demanding, wanted discipline and obedience. Paul Jr., artistic and independent, wanted freedom to create. Their fights became part of the show's identity, but off-camera things were even more explosive. By 2008, the shop had turned into a battleground. Employees felt the tension, and even Paul's younger brother Mikey, who tried to play peacemaker, seemed emotionally drained. The breaking point came in September 2008, when Paul Jr. showed up late to work again. Sr. snapped, and what followed was an argument so intense it became infamous. Paul Jr. threw a chair and stormed out. His father chased him and fired him on the spot. That moment didn't just end a workday. It ended their partnership. What followed was a painful legal war. Sr. tried to buy out Jr.'s 20% stake in the company, offering just $500,000. When Jr. refused, Sr. filed lawsuits demanding millions more. Court battles dragged on for years, with judges and appeals deciding the fate of Orange County Choppers. In the end, Jr. won a key legal victory that allowed him to keep his stake. But the emotional damage was far worse than any financial battle. Father and son stopped speaking, and holidays became lonely reminders of a family torn apart. After leaving Orange County Choppers, Paul Jr. faced new challenges. A one-year non-compete clause kept him from building bikes, so he turned to other design projects, including products and even playgrounds. It was one of the hardest years of his life, but he refused to give up. When the clause ended in 2010, he came back stronger. He launched Paul Jr. Designs right across the street from his father's shop. Slowly, loyal friends and employees left Orange County choppers to join him, including longtime collaborator Vinny and even his brother Mikey. The move felt like a rebellion, and soon, Discovery Channel capitalized on it with a new show, American Chopper, Senior Vest Jr. Each episode turned their personal feud into television drama, with fans encouraged to pick sides. While some called it tantrum TV, it kept audiences hooked. For Paul Jr., though, it wasn't just about ratings, it was about proving he could succeed on his own terms. Over time, Paul Jr. Designs earned respect for its creative vision and innovation, even introducing new techniques that changed the custom bike world. He had stepped out of his father's shadow and built a name of his own. Today, Paul Jr.'s story is remembered not only for the motorcycles he built, but also for the painful lessons that came with fame and family conflict. He has openly said that becoming a father himself helped him understand forgiveness in a new way. While he and his father are no longer at war, they are far from close. They haven't shared a holiday meal in over 15 years, a heartbreaking reality for a family once bound together by steel and creativity. Paul Jr. has found peace in building, in his own family, and in keeping his designs alive. His journey is a reminder that success often comes with a heavy price, and sometimes the hardest battles are not fought in the shop or the courtroom, but within the family. The tragedy of Paul Teutul Jr. is not that he lost everything. It's that, in gaining fame and success, he lost the one relationship that should have mattered most. Yet, through it all, he remains a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the power of forging your own path, even when it means breaking away from the very person who taught you how to build. As Paul Jr. grew older, especially after becoming a husband and father, his outlook on life began to change. The anger and resentment he carried from years of fighting with his father started to fade as he realized the importance of family. He admitted in interviews that being a parent gave him a new perspective. Suddenly, he could understand some of the pressures and decisions his father faced, even if he still disagreed with how Paul Sard had handled things. This maturity didn't erase the pain of their fights, but it gave Paul Jr. the ability to forgive. He often said that he didn't want to hold on to bitterness anymore because it only weighed him down. Instead, he wanted to focus on raising his son in a healthier environment and breaking the cycle of anger that had defined his own relationship with his father. That journey toward forgiveness didn't happen overnight, but it showed a softer side of Paul Jr. that fans deeply respected. It was proof that even after years of chaos, people can grow and find peace if they choose to. Even though the show ended years ago, American Chopper left behind a legacy that is still felt today. For many viewers, it wasn't just about watching motorcycles being built. It was about seeing a real family struggle with success, pride, and the cost of fame. The Teutul family's battles became a symbol of how money and television can change relationships, sometimes for the worse. Yet, at the same time, it showed how creativity and hard work can make ordinary people into household names. Paul Jr., in particular, inspired many young builders who wanted to design bikes or start their own businesses. His ability to turn raw materials into rolling art proved that dreams could become reality if you had passion. Even now, reruns of the show still attract viewers, and fans talk about their favorite bikes online. The cultural impact of American Chopper proves that it was more than just a TV series. It was a window into the struggles of fame and family, told in the loud and fiery way only the Teutul's could deliver. Today, Paul Jr. lives a much quieter life compared to the height of his television fame. He still works on motorcycle designs and occasionally makes public appearances, but his main focus has